So here we have another f and g, and remember, in order to tell if they're inverses, when I plug in g into f and f into g, I need to get back just x as my answer. So let's do that. Let's do f of g of x right over here. And I'm going to write out what f of x is. It's negative 125 times x to the third power. But instead of writing it as x, remember g of x is my input now. So I'm going to write in g of x. And instead of leaving it as g of x, I'm going to recognize that g of x here is negative 1 times 1/5 times the third root of x. So that'll play out like this. Negative 125 times, and g of x is negative times 1/5 times the third root of x. So now we just have to do the brute force of some algebra. So let's go ahead and let's write this out as negative 125 times, and think about this negative as just a negative 1. That's a little bit more helpful for me, so I'm going to write it out that way. And then I know that this third power gets distributed to each individual term since it's all multiplication. So it's negative 1 to the third power times 1/5 to the third power times the cubed root of x to the third power. And now we just have to resolve all this. So it's negative 125 times negative 1 to the third power is just negative 1 times 1 over 125 times the cubed root to the third power. Those are inverse functions, so they'll cancel out. And that just gets me x. And so now when I simplify all of this down, negative 125 times negative 1 is just 125 times 1 over 125 times x, and that's equal to just x. So f of g of x works out. But let's check out g of f of x. So if I have g of f of x, g is just negative 1/5 times the cubed root of whatever x is. But I know my input x is now just f of x. So I'm going to take what f of x is, and I'm going to plug it in to my f of x here. And so that should get me negative 1/5 times the cubed root of negative 125 x to the third power. And so now when I simplify that out and distribute this negative, I get negative 1/5 times the cubed root of negative 125 times the cubed root of x to the third power. And so all that simplifies down to negative 1/5 times negative 5 times the cubed root to the third power. Those are inverses, so they'll cancel out, and that gets me x. So negative 1/5 times negative 5 is just 1 times x, which my final answer is just x. So both of these, f of g of x and g of f of x, result in just x. So that means, yes, f and g are both inverse functions here.